a cash cow to assault and attack people and never give them a moment's respite? Why is the church silent on that issue? We looked at that last week. This week, to kind of wrap it up, to me it's the whole bizarre questioning of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. That the governor said that funding should be cut for all studies that are based on those three horrible evils: diversity, inclusion, equity. How did they get popular? You know, what has happened to our nation? What I want to suggest is the prediction is now that the anti-gay laws are not going to make it out of committee. They won't become laws, they'll just be bills. But see, a lot of times they don't expect the bills to pass. It's all about raising money at other people's expense, of using hate and scapegoating to organize with. What I want to suggest is every time we have the conversation as a nation about whether or not somebody gets their basic human rights, we have injected poison into the bloodstream of this nation. I believe this, that every time we ask whether LGBTQ people get life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, every time we ask the question whether the poor get life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, every time we gerrymander where the voices of people of color and their votes, their very votes, get watered down. What is more treasonous than taking away somebody's vote in a democracy? Where is the church? Where is the thunder that we see in Scripture towards the oppressed? I think the church has been a huge part of the problem. But how do you move from Jesus to white Christian nationalism? That's kind of a hairpin turn. And yet so much of the church has been an enemy to women, has sided with the oppression of the indigenous people, the people that were kidnapped and brought here. So what I want to suggest is the prophetic essence of Christianity thunders against those indignities. And that even though we can't get in control of everything that's happening, and that's frustrating, we can live in peace and joy if we give our hearts to that message. If we don't let ourselves get divided, if every human being counts. But three of the basic teachings of the church keep that from happening. And they're the teachings that undermine diversity, equity, and inclusion. Purity, obedience, and orthodoxy. I want to suggest that justice is not possible when those are the focuses of the church. We'll see whether you agree with me at the end of this. The first is purity. When Jesus taught, there were people considered to be impure by birth. If you've not done the math, that included you. Right? First people that were ruled unclean were the Gentiles. And there's some truth in that. But the Christian church has been willing to open up the door for ourselves and drop the Levitical code for ourselves and yet employ it on other people. That idea of purity, that idea of heaven as a gated community, is the opposite of what Christ taught. And our passage today is really important as we go into the Easter season because the church has turned the story around. In this prophetic calling, people are called to go out into the wilderness We tell the Palm Sunday thing, it's about coming into Jerusalem, and all of the kind of chosen and joyful people are called into Jerusalem. But the prophetic calling is to go out into the wilderness, and the wilderness is where all the rejected people were. When people had mental health issues, they were shunted out there. When people were rejected, the wilderness was where the rejected people went. And the calling of the prophet is to leave the temple and build a highway for the people that are excluded. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a little bit like diversity to me. I ran across a quote this week that I really like. And I think there are a lot of Americans that need to hear this. I'll read it twice. The world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit. I want to suggest that there are people from certain demographics that need to hear this. The world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They're unique manifestations of the human spirit. Have you ever noticed how when Jesus healed people, it was almost always people that would technically be called unclean? Have you ever noticed that? You think that's an accident? You think that's a coincidence? I don't think so. I think when in Scripture it says, call no human being unclean, that's leaving this purity religion and taking up a religion of compassion that gets its hands dirty if that's what it takes. One of the first things I realized when I started doing news interviews is you're going to get misquoted. Right? People are going to think you're crazy. But the option to that is silence. And I'd rather be misquoted and misunderstood than to be silent while you're under attack. Do we have an applause thing now? I see that. Nice work. Nice work. Diversity means having a place at the table. Communion means having a place at the table. It means everyone has a place at the table. And if you don't understand that, what Jesus is doing, what the calling is, what the prophet is doing, you've misunderstood it. If you think you're going to be the small noble band going to heaven, why would you want to go to that heaven? Why? Why would you go to an eternal church service? With people just like you and me. It's like, it wouldn't be heaven without diversity. So the prophet says, I want you to build a highway, and I want you to make it straight, not crooked, for all the people who've been excluded. Again, the stones the builders have rejected are the cornerstones of the new temple of humankind. You don't get that, you don't get Jesus. That Super Bowl commercial, he gets us. That's not really the question, is it? The question is, do we get what he's saying? So leave your pedestals from the culture and your religion, and your economic status. Go out to where the hurting people are and invite them into this joyous new model of humankind. So that's diversity, getting a place at the table. The second step is equity. And this is getting off the menu, right? It's one thing to be excited, you're at the table, but equity means there's nobody on the menu, right? If you believe in capitalism, which is the last vestige of cannibalism in humankind, if you believe it's okay for people to suffer because they don't have money, for children to be deprived of education because they weren't born to rich parents. But I don't think you understand what Jesus is talking about, with all due respect. The prophet says, the mountains shall be lowered and the valleys raised. Now, what do you suppose that means? I don't know if you ever listened to Mary's song that she sang when Jesus was inside her, but it's not conservative politics. The powerful will be lowered, the weak will be raised. That's Jubilee. You can't have a nation of dignity when some of the people hoard it all and other people are deprived. The mountains have to be lowered. The valleys have to be raised. Nobody should be without power. Nobody should be without medicine just because they were born poor. No one should have to work a dead-end job their entire lives because they weren't born to rich parents. This is a vision for all humankind. One of my favorite definitions of justice comes from Eugene Debs, that I've heard was a socialist. And he said, justice is giving others every right you claim for yourself. Now that's kind of clear, isn't it? Justice is giving people every right you claim for yourself. If you claim the right to marriage, you can't shut the door on someone else. If you believe you deserve medicine, then that means your neighbor deserves medicine too. Every right that we claim for ourselves, we give to other people. And that is justice. So the prophet said and Jesus repeated, all the valleys have to be raised, all the hills made low, so everybody can make the joyous journey. The last part of the formula, I think, is the idea of orthodoxy, of loyalty to the Christian church. Because that's not what Jesus taught. And one of the things that we need to be reminded almost every week is Jesus wasn't here when the church came along. And he wasn't there to defend himself when Scripture got written down. Loyalty to your group, to your nation, to your church, puts loyalty to the common good on the perimeters, right? You can't say Jesus first and America first. And you really can't say Jesus first because that's not what he said. It's universal love that moves to justice. It's compassion for everyone that he taught. When Jesus knocks the tables over, I think it's a perfect representation of nonpartisan activism. It doesn't look like that, does it? It looks like Jesus is choosing some people over someone else. But he's not. Religion had become a barrier where some people got in and some people didn't get in. And some people got the best seats, some people didn't get the best seats. It wasn't Judaism, it was a nation under captivity. So there's nothing in Christianity, sane Christianity, that assaults Judaism. But fundamentalism is condemned roundly, from ship to stern in Christianity. You think you're right and everybody's wrong. You think your group is right and everybody else. You think it all can be put into right, wrong, these dualisms. Then there's something wrong, something missing. Does anybody remember what the national motto was before the last kind of monstrosity? The monstrosity now is, in God we trust. What a vacuous Stupid motto. Because we all think of God differently, don't we? You can't get two people to agree on what that means. We all think it means, okay, well, since God is on my side, then, I'm going to take over the body politic and make sure everybody's just like me. The motto before that was what? E pluribus unum. Diversity, inclusion, equity. E pluribus unum, out of the many, one. That our unity comes from our diversity. That was a good motto, right? That's a motto that makes sense. It guides the nation. If we're trying to find our way, I almost said back, but America has always been fascist to certain groups of people, right? I mean, we don't like it now because it's affecting us. In the comfortable church. But there have been people from day one who've only seen the backhand of democracy in this church. Dr. King said, we may have come in on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. Our indifference to the suffering of the persecuted people has set us up for the same victimization. Right? The fact that we were willing to sell out any member of our human family has made our own lives precarious. So the way out is solidarity, universal solidarity. The kind of things the prophets were talking about, the kinds of things that Jesus was talking about. This is not Democrat, Republican. It transcends that. Because even Democrat, Republican, they trade off the marginalized to make a bargain. I used to believe in speaking truth to power, and I went and I would speak to these lawmakers and stuff. But one day I looked in the eyes and I realized, what am I doing? They already know the truth. This isn't about a difference of opinion. It's about oppression. It's about a lack of justice. I can love you as a human being, but I cannot call you friend if you're oppressing someone else. That's different. And the church cannot remain silent any longer about the people they're crying. They've been crying all along. So to wrap up, in a way, a little bit, this nation is being torn apart at the seams, not because there's diversity or equity or inclusion. It's being torn apart because it doesn't have a principle with which to bind itself together. Making money, it turns out, is not a meaningful worldview if you're trying to survive. Reinforcing your boundaries, apparently, is not a life-sustaining. If you've oppressed the rest of the world, there is no wall that's big enough. There's no prison strong enough to protect us from the consequences of our exploitation of other people. So the prophet is recommending a different way. Instead of purity, let's try diversity. Let's find the love that gets its hands dirty to heal the world. Instead of group loyalty, let's find a love that embraces everyone. A love that allows us to look in the mirror and not be shamed. And finally, instead of obedience to the rules of hierarchy and calling that moralism, if I could go through the Bible and mark through every time it says the word righteous and scratch through that and put justice, and then you'll understand what Jesus is talking about. This isn't about moralism. It's not about us being personally righteous. It's about a world where everyone can find hope and dignity. So diversity gives people a place at the table. Inclusion gives them a voice at the table. Equity means there's nobody on the menu at the table. So that's my struggles with this text. We're going to take a moment for you to think about how you would have preached it. So thank you for your attention.